What's going on, everybody? Time to talk Dallas Mavericks basketball. The offseason, I guess, technically upon us. We're used to a big free agent frenzy in July, rumors in June. It's going to be a little bit of a different makeup. Joined right now by the great Bobby Karalla of DallasMavs.com. So I guess let's start with that. What are the important dates, or even if it's not specific dates, what's kind of the rough timeline of what we know as we get ready for the next NBA season?
So all we know right now, Jared, is that the draft is going to be November 18th, and that's pretty much it. And I would say that might even be subject to change based on, how things go. But the combine is going to be a little different too. So ordinarily the draft combine takes place like around May 15th, about a month and a half before the draft in Chicago in one location. This time around, it's going to be a little different. So teams are already starting to talk to prospects, and I believe there will be maybe some like scrimmages or like virtual workout games kind of thing that teams can tune into. So that will be going on for the next month or so. But the NBA draft will be the next big milestone event for fans to know about. That's November 18th. And then after that, no one really knows. Free agency ordinarily starts about a week after the draft. I don't think that's going to happen this time around because the league still has to figure out the salary cap and like, what are we going to do about the CBA and, negotiating all that stuff could take some time. So it could be late November that happens. It could be early December, mid-December. You're just going to have to be flexible.
All right, so the Mavs are picking 18th and 31st, like we said. What obviously you don't know names necessarily, but what are the realistic needs the Mavs could try and address, or just general strategy approaching the draft with those picks?
This draft is going to be kind of like the Wild West, I think, because there are some teams like the Celtics, for example, have 3 first-round picks, and there are some teams that have multiple picks and not many available roster spots. And so those teams could be looking to package picks together and move up. They could be looking to move back. There are some teams that could just be trying to just straight up sell picks because, with the salary cap kind of being in flux and the luxury tax threshold could be lower, teams are going to be trying to get off money. So if you are a team like the Mavs, maybe you have an opportunity to package 18 and 31 together and move up or buy picks and do that thing. But, other than just simply the way that the picks are distributed, if you've been following college basketball and kind of the scouting game and everything, there's kind of this group of 3 or 4 or 5 guys at the top of the draft that are consensus sort of like, elite prospects relative to the rest of the class. But then everybody else just sort of mishmashed together, really between like 6 or 7 and like the end of the first round. So if you're Dallas at 18, you kind of just have to let the draft come to you unless you do want to move up. But as far as specific needs, I mean, they're kind of set in the backcourt, especially if they can bring back Trey Burke. They have a ton of guards and playmaking and everything. They were a little thin at big in the playoffs, but that's because Dwight Powell and KP both got hurt. So I think they're kind of set there. So I think you're really looking for wing defenders and shooters. There are plenty of those in this draft. Now, maybe there's a big run on them before it even gets to 18. Maybe they're all gone. But it feels like you can find a player there. And then at pick 31, you kind of get the first guy that wasn't taken in the first round. And like you said, you can change the amount of money that you give them, different number of guaranteed years. So if you're a first round pick, you get 4 years, 2 with the team option. If you're a second round pick, you can get more years guaranteed, but at a lower average annual value. So it kind of works out for Dallas at pick 31. And they've had some success in that range in the past, getting Jalen Brunson, Jay Crowder, and some other guys in the early 30s, where typically it's going to be your 3 and 4 year college players who are maybe like a little older, so they don't have the same potential as a 19-year-old kid. And those guys are good because you can plug and play them right away. And Rick Carlisle likes his guys that aren't going to make mistakes. And typically, guys that go 31, seniors, 4-year college players are going to have kind of the higher basketball IQ to where you can plug them in a winning situation and they can contribute. So I think they can find a guy that can, rotation players really at both 18 and 31. Or like I said, they could package and move up or move back. I mean, literally anything can happen for any team. This is one of the most unpredictable draft classes I think that has come along in a really long time.
I love noting, this means absolutely nothing, but the legendary J.R. Smith was drafted 18th overall by the Hornets or New Orleans or whatever New Orleans was back when he was drafted, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't know how good of a player you can get at 18, but there are plenty of entertaining players that could be available at 18.
Hey, if they get the next JR, I'm not going to complain. I will not complain.
You mentioned Kristaps Porzingis. I know that the timetable for him is not yet known. Anything of note there with the surgery and future concern? Is this, a good step towards continuing a recovery and long-term being okay? Are there red flags? Like what's your read on this?
Well, I don't know. I mean, so ordinarily you would say, all right, a meniscus isn't as bad as an ACL, right? But then, one of the more recent kind of injury catastrophes in Mavs history was Chandler Parsons, who injured his meniscus, I think maybe in the same knee twice. And it just turned into this really, kind of bad thing that kind of derailed his career, unfortunately. And so hopefully it's not a repeat incident of that. Hopefully KP's able to bounce back. They seem to be optimistic, but as far as the timetable goes too, it sort of depends. You can either repair a meniscus or just like totally like remove it. And that can sort of change the timeline as well. But I would say regardless of the type of procedure that's done, he should be good to go by the time training camp rolls around. Fortunately, next season will start, I think, at earliest about 3 months from now. So that should give him plenty of time to rehab. And he is beginning rehab immediately. So that's good too. But yeah, I mean, hopefully it's not a long-term thing. Obviously, coming off the left knee injury that he had a couple years ago in New York, and then he had the right knee soreness in January, and maybe that was connected to the meniscus. Who knows? I mean, I have no idea, but knees are precious, especially for big men. And so, that's going to be something that I feel like fans are going to be holding their breath about really for the rest of his career. But, if you're KP, you got to go out there, you got to keep playing. And if you're the Mavs, you have to put a plan together for him that will hopefully minimize his chances of incurring another injury like that, because obviously, Luka is amazing and they have a really good supporting cast, but this team can only go as far as KP is available, right? If he's not playing, then you don't really have a chance. So you got to keep that guy healthy.
As far as the offseason, I think you and I earlier in the pandemic spoke about how, this offseason free agent class is not nearly as appetizing as, a year from now with, that's the Giannis class. Kawhi, LeBron can be free. I think Paul George is free. A number of really maybe is Victor Oladipo this offseason or next offseason maybe. I think
next. Yeah, pretty much if you've ever made an all-star team, you're a free agent next summer.
So as far as like the big splash type of signing that Mavs fans wanted this previous offseason that maybe didn't happen, probably isn't going to happen this offseason unless there's a trade that I don't know. It doesn't seem likely. What's your outlook on what is realistic for this offseason, and where could the Mavs maybe get creative to do something exciting?
Okay, so for realistic expectations, I would say you find a veteran caliber player for the mid-level exception, which, depending on where the cap will be between probably like $9 and $10 million per season. But what's interesting about it is that, there's only like 5 or 6 teams that have cap space. And so there's going to be 25 teams that have the same exact type of contract to offer for the same group of 30 or to 40 players. And so I wonder if those guys in that group, because there's not really a lot of competition as far as average annual value and everything, I wonder if there will be a lot of guys who will just want to take 1-year deals and hit free agency next summer whenever everybody has money, and maybe they could get more money. And so, it's going to be interesting to see if they do try and find a guy that they can just give 1 year to, of course, to keep cap space open and options open for next summer, or if they lock down somebody for multiple years who's maybe, on the tail end of their prime and wants to lock up one last big contract. So that's something to watch out for. But I would say, yeah, I mean, a guy who can play on the wing and who can defend a little bit for the mid-level exception would be a job well done, in my opinion. And then, of course, bringing back Trey Burke. That's like a huge thing that I want to see happen. But, we'll see. I'm sure he'll have plenty of suitors. If they are going to make a splash, they're one of the few teams in the league that have multiple contributors, rotation caliber players, starter caliber players who make above the minimum and beneath, double digits, like 8 figures per year, right? So they have a lot of guys that make like $7, $8, $9 million per year. And so if you're a competitor who's trying to get off maybe a bigger contract, get shorter term deals, you're flirting with the luxury tax, you want to save some money, The Mavs could be a potential dance partner, package 3 or 4 players together and swing up and try and get one of those star caliber players. And depending on who you ask, this summer could be either really boring, where everybody just signs mid-level deals and teams are just waiting for next summer, or insane because teams are going to be trying to get ahead of the curve a little bit and get off money so that they can be players again next summer. So the Mavs could be kind of like opportunistic in that sense, to where if a team does have a big player they want to get off of, they can swing up and get that guy, or they can sit back, just use the mid-level exception and really trying to hit a home run next summer.
All right, last thing, and I love just chatting, hoops with you in general. So the NBA Finals just wrapped up. The Lakers won. LeBron got his 4th ring, and I know the default now is like LeBron or MJ, and it's those debates are fun because that's a part of what makes sports fun, but they also can become very tiring, and maybe much like politics, you're not going to really convince the other side, of your position. The one thing that and this is not taking a stance. I mean, listen, I'm a huge LeBron guy, but listen, those two guys are like incredible. They're, unbelievable players. One thing that, and this is not a Jordan didn't do this, LeBron did take. This is just like, I think it's interesting because it's relatively new. LeBron is the first guy, but like he's the first guy we'd consider an all-time great who's gone through his life entirely pretty much in the social media era. And one thing that to me is impressive is that, every single step LeBron takes is analyzed and analyzed and analyzed and scrutinized and scrutinized and scrutinized. And has he been perfect? No. I just think that there's an extra level of exhaustion that players these days, not just LeBron, any player, they deal with the social media era. And I mean, the biggest slip up maybe is, and the decision aside, like his son getting caught with like marijuana. Like this guy's never been caught doing anything, illegal or whatever. And every move is tracked. It seems like it would be so tiring and so exhausting. And I just think for him to be playing at the level he's playing, nearly, just short of 20 years after his debut, and having to deal with all that, I just think it's super impressive. Whether you think Jordan's better or not, the reality is Jordan didn't deal with all that type of attention. He was a rock star in his own right, but not in this way. And I just think that is something that athletes today have to deal with that athletes then did not. And LeBron, as much as any basketball player, really in history, I guess, because in the history, Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Wilt Chamberlain. I know Lou and Kareem are the same person. That wanted to get both versions. Like Magic, like these guys, Jordan, they didn't deal with this. I don't know. I'm rambling. I just think that's has an extra layer of impressiveness.
Yeah, I mean, like Larry Bird was getting in bar fights like during the playoffs, and Jordan was playing 36 holes the day of finals games. And I mean, like, all these guys through the 80s and 90s were just like hanging out, having fun. But could you imagine what people would say if LeBron was seen on a golf course, like, period, during the playoffs, like, let alone the morning of a game? Like, there's no chance that he would, get away with that stuff. And I think the most cynical LeBron haters or whatever would say that, he brings a lot of that pressure upon himself by team hopping and, trying to, play with all his buddies and everything. But to them, I would respond with just like, he's won everywhere he's gone. He's won finals MVPs with 3 different teams. And so it's one thing to just say, all right, maybe things are trending a little downward here. I'm gonna get out of here and go play with my friends in Miami, or I'm gonna go back to Cleveland, or all right, I'm gonna go live in LA. Who could blame him for wanting to do that? But he's won everywhere he's gone. And so, he does bring all that pressure upon himself, but he still delivers every single time. He's won a championship everywhere he's ever been, which is just, it's really amazing because there's guys like Dirk and Tim Duncan who spend their entire careers with one team, playing with the same coach for a long time. And sure, the supporting cast changes and everything, but there's always that constant. You live in the same place, you got the same coach, you got the same owner or GM or whatever. But LeBron has never had that kind of sense of consistency. He's won championships with different casts of players, with different superstar teammates, with different coaches. everywhere he's ever been. And the only constant that he's ever had in his career is himself, which is just, it's really, really amazing. And, so no matter how you feel about kind of the nomadic lifestyle and, always trying to go on to the next thing and whatever clashes with coaches or whatever, he's delivered everywhere he's ever been. And that's ultimately, that's all that matters, right? You play to win the game. And he has won 4 championships, 3 different teams. And it's just awesome. He's an incredible player.
And one thing I think it's important to note about this title, and it almost seems like this will be the forgotten title, with everything that's gone on this year. People might think, oh, well, they were stacked. They should have won. Well, a lot of people thought the Clippers would dethrone them for one, but two,
I did.
Yeah, I thought I could be wrong. I don't think the talent gap was that far between the Lakers and the Heat. Now, Bam and Goran getting hurt did not help because the Heat's calling card is just the depth. Like, it's similar to the Mavs in 2011. Like, they didn't have the big three that Miami had, but man, the depth and the ability to get contributions from so many was so critical. Like, I don't think that obviously LeBron and AD are, undoubtedly better than Bam and Jimmy, although don't sleep on Bam.
Margin's not that big. Margin's not that big.
and I would say players 3 through the end of the bench on the Heat, when healthy, are better than players 3 through the end of the bench for the Lakers. Now, playoff Rondo and all that stuff, but I just don't. I don't think that the Lakers had a roster that was built to just roll through. Like, there was competition, and that didn't stop for me in the finals. I thought that could have been a better series if Bam and Goran didn't get hurt.
Yeah, the Lakers' third best player probably in the finals was either Rondo or Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who are, considered probably like fringe starting caliber players, where the Heat are rolling out, 8, 9 guys. Now, they did trim the rotation down, partly out of necessity due to injuries and also just to match up better and everything. But, I think the big advantage that the Lakers had over everybody all season was just their size. In the regular season, they showed size can still win. You can play AD at the 4 and just overwhelm guys with mismatches. You can play him at the 5, and a lot of big men just aren't athletic or tall enough or long enough or strong enough or whatever enough to keep up with him. You give him open threes. Well, he shot 40% from 3 in the playoffs, which is just insane. He was their best 3-point shooter in the playoffs. They just, LeBron is a computer. 56-0 when taking a lead into the fourth quarter, including the playoffs, which is a mark that will probably never, ever, ever be matched or beaten. I can't imagine they do the same thing next year, but the fact that they did it this year, year 1 of AD, a lot of these guys, their first season with the team, it is just a testament to how great LeBron is and how, if you have a big man like AD who can play inside, outside, protect the rim and everything, you're going to be at a huge advantage. And, there's only so many of those guys. They got one in Dallas. There's maybe a handful of others around the league, guys like Karl Towns, for example, and Jokic in Denver, who also went to the conference finals. So I wouldn't be so gung-ho about like the death of the big man or anything. I think AD has something to say about that, and some of these other guys do too. But you combine a player like that with a guy who's seen it all like LeBron, and you're going to have a pretty special team. We'll see if they can repeat next year. The West is going to be better. Warriors will be back and everything. But for now, like I wouldn't pick against them, especially with all the chaos going on across the freeway in LA. They are just like, the Lakers are in a perfect position because they could potentially add more guys.
Well,
with the mid-level, like there are veterans who will want to go there now.
That's right. You're talking about the 1-year deal guys. If you're just going to take a year to try and build up your value, it's never bad to build up on a winning team or with LeBron,
or in LA,
or, and just the other side of that, like, hey, 1 year, let's go somewhere I could win. That's not a bad destination. So
yeah, absolutely. And there are some guys hitting free agency. Now, I got to be careful what I say, but just the other day, Danilo Gallinari came out and said, I don't really care about money. I just want to win a championship.
Yeah.
And so, there are going to be those guys who we're all hoping in Dallas will come here like in 3 or 4 years whenever Luka's like that dude. But for now, LeBron is still the king. And so, there's going to be guys flocking there. So the West is not getting any easier. It'll still be the best conference ever 15 years from now. We're never going to get out of this. We're never going to get out of this cycle, Jared.
Bobby, it's always great. I can't wait to have more conversations when there's more stuff kind of on the calendar ready to to get excited about. But November 18th, the draft. I'm going to enter my name. Maybe I'll get considered at 31.
Might get picked, man. They got 60 picks.
Yeah,
You might be taken.
Hey, let me tell you this. There have been guys who are just barely more questionable draft picks than if you or I were taken.
I've seen your highlight tapes, man. You can play.
Thanks, Bobby.
I appreciate you, man. Anytime.